That was the most one-sided final I've seen for a very long time. Could have been 6, 7, 8 if they really wanted it to.
It was an absolute pressing masterclass from PSG, who played at an intensity that I think has been unrivaled in the Premier League.
In the league phase, I watched them play at Arsenal, and if you'd said then, well, this team are going to go on and conquer Europe, I'd have said you're absolutely mad.
Dembele's amazing, isn't he? Absolutely ridiculous, his upward trajectory. Sometimes you find a manager that gets you.
I cannot give enough credit to Luis Enrique.
He didn't score, but he was probably the man of the match because he's the one who leads the press. And if you listen to Luis Enrique, he says, give the Ballon d'Or to Ousmane Dembele right now.
You're absolutely right, and he probably will win the Ballon d'Or, but it's a brilliant, talented player as well who has dropped his ego.
What about Inter Milan?
It was a little bit sad to see because they deserve better, especially what they gave us in the semi-final. What happened in Serie A took a lot out of them, and this game was one game too far.
This team probably has come to the end of the road. Brilliant achievement to get in 2 Champions League finals.
There's a lot of players now, they know that was their last chance.
So it's Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's Alex Crook and Scott Minto FA Cup winner. Yes, the club season is now officially over. That's right. How is everybody planning to fill the next few months? I'll tell you this. Just before I decided to sit down and record this podcast, someone delivered a skip to the front of my house. So if you want an indication as to what I'll be doing for the next little while, that is it. Where did it all go, Pete Tong? Scott, what have you been doing?
Oh, I like what you did there. Yeah, I was out with a few of the boys, including Dean Ashton last night at the Royal Albert Hall with Pete Tong's Ibiza Classics. And do you know what? I wouldn't say I was one of the young ones in there, but let's just say I wasn't one of them. It was a very diverse age. Mate, it was brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed it. Dino was bang up for it as well. Sal and Carl, and must thank Sal for sorting out the tickets. It was a great night.
Those two boys, big producers on talkSPORT. Of course, are you sure it was Pete Tong? Because when Crook met Pete Tong, he called him Judge Jules.
Not strictly true, but yeah, we had a day at the Qatar World Cup chaperoning Pete Tong. Nice guy and very good performer as well. I'm going to be doing
on Twitter. Did you put on Twitter that you were with Judge Jules or something like that? You did, didn't you? It was something like that.
I called him Fat Boy Slim, I think, not to his face.
Oh, no, that was it. Something like that.
Easily confused, mate. I've got a decent summer ahead. I've got a trip to a posh winery in Kent this weekend. I've got a trip to Cornwall. I'm off to Spain. I'm off to Portugal. 2 days at Royal Ascot. A whole week at Glorious Goodwood. What's not to love?
And I've got a skip. How has this happened?
Just to add to that as well, Sam, I've got 1, possibly 2 days at Ascot. I've got a golfing holiday in Portugal next week as well, which I'm really looking forward to. And I reckon that, the people who deliver the skip probably saw you with the bin in Wrocław last week and thought, you know what? Yeah, let's deliver a skip for him.
He could be a skip ambassador, this guy. Anyway, enough of you lot talking rubbish. Let's get on to what's happened over the weekend, because PSG have finally lifted the Champions League, and they did it in the most emphatic of fashions. Wow, PSG delivered what can only be described as an emphatic beatdown of Inter to lift their first ever Champions League. Fair to say that they've probably been the best side of 2025. Scott, slow start to the Champions League, but since Christmas they've been pretty much electric. Not unbeatable, certainly not impenetrable, but very difficult to contain.
Yeah, and I think you're right to say 2025. And let's not forget they finished 15th in the league table. And had to go through the knockout stages, but they've pretty much done it all, haven't they? They've beaten City, they've beaten Liverpool, they've beaten Villa, they've beaten Arsenal. They seem to like playing the Premier League sides, but they love playing Serie A sides, don't they? I mean, that was the most one-sided final I've seen for a very long time, and not just because of the scoreline. The way they played from the very first minute, a bit of a bizarre kickoff, wasn't it? But after that, it was like, we're having the ball, you're not. It could have been 6, 7, 8 if they really wanted it to.
Yeah, I think it was all part of the tactic, actually. The idea of kicking the ball straight out over to the far side was to squeeze Inter in right from the very off. And if you watch the game back, and actually I did this Sunday night, just to have a look at exactly why Inter got themselves into such a pickle. And it's all to do with Dembele and the pressing machine that comes in behind him. I mean, he didn't score, but he was probably the man of the match because he's the one who leads the press. Every time Jan Sommer gets the ball, he's on top of him, right in his face. So every pass that he plays out from the back is a risky one. Now, if you're Inter, you should really adapt here and go long. But because the press is so suffocating, the wave after pressure just keeps on coming. And in the end, they just will. And then they can't find their rhythm. It was an absolute pressing masterclass from PSG, who played at an intensity that I think has been unrivaled in the Premier League.
Yeah, I agree, and we mentioned it actually on the Sunday session, didn't we? It was almost like a Six Nations rugby kickoff. Kick the ball as high up the pitch as possible, and try and win the line out. And it looked bizarre, and the commentators on television mentioned it as well, that's a bit of a mistake. But I think you're right. I think it wasn't a mistake. It was choreographed just to press high right from the off, and they couldn't live with PSG's intensity into Milan. I thought before the game that their experience, their defensive know-how would come to the fore. But it looked like men against boys, and not in the negative sense of the word. I thought Mkhitaryan looked every inch a 36-year-old. Acerbi, who's obviously had some great moments en route to the final, looked 37 years of age. And those youngsters of PSG just swarmed all over them.
Yeah, and if you listen to Luis Enrique, he says, give the Ballon d'Or to Ousmane Dembele right now, not only for his goals over the course of the season, but for his contribution to the team and leading that press and working as hard as he did throughout 90 minutes. Well, he didn't actually have to stay on for 90 minutes in the end because they'd already got the job done by about 65. But it was an absolutely brilliant performance. And there's a few other stars that deserve a mention. Desiree Doué, who played over on the right-hand side, absolutely frightening. And Kvaratskhelia, 4 major medals for him this season. He gets one for Napoli winning the title in Serie A as well. Why did no Premier League side go after him, Scott? I mean, would he not fit into the Premier League? He was only £70 million.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the way he played as well, even when they were 4-0 up, he was tracking back and working hard. So it's not just like this skillful guy who wants to only sort of plays when he has the ball. It's almost like you've got Mbappe, who's now gone, and then you bring in, obviously not exactly the same time, but Kvaratskhelia, who can come in and do that job on the left and just be brilliant with the ball, but brilliant without it as well. I mean, you talk about Dembele, and you're absolutely right, and he probably will win the Ballon d'Or, but there's no point in one person pressing if everybody else isn't in the same place. And this is where we need to give massive credit to Luis Enrique. He dropped Dembele earlier in the season because he wasn't doing exactly what he wanted to do. And then he gave him the responsibility when he brought him in, saying, you're going to be my 9, false 9, whatever you call it. But it was almost just like the Ajax side of the early 70s, where everybody was rotating. And, the Inter heads without the ball were just like, where do I go? There's always an option here. Hakimi was sometimes playing not just right wing, but centre forward. Doué was on the other side. Kvaratskhelia was tracking back. Vitinha was almost dropping in at times, but also playing as a 10. Everybody was rotating, but it seemed like everybody else knew that they were going to rotate and then where to be, again, with and without the ball. And I cannot give enough credit to Luis Enrique for getting these superstars, and that's pretty much what they are, without being quite the Galacticos, but they are superstars. They've all got egos to work in the way that he's in the way that they did. And it was just an unbelievable night.
Yeah, that tactical sort of carousel of players moving positions all the time reminded Rio Ferdinand of what it was like to play against Barcelona in 2011. That was slightly different, I think, where what they would do is pass you so quickly around the pitch that people were moving and you couldn't get near them. Whereas this team moves so much that as they drift in and out of different positions, you lose exactly your coordinates of who you're supposed to be marking. You can't quickly enough pass someone on to somebody else, which is why DiMarco, for the first goal, gets so confused because he wants to follow Hakimi in towards that right-hand side, and then somebody else darts across, so he goes even further, leaves Hakimi free, and then he's standing in the middle of the goal for a tap-in because that movement was just so good, and it just outfoxed absolutely everybody. You mentioned about the nature of the team, the makeup of the team, saying that there's not the Galactico era anymore, but there are still quite a few £50 million players. I mean, Doué wasn't free. Kvaratskhelia was 70 million quid. Dembele was an expensive acquisition. they were able to sort of waste a load of money on 90 million Kolo Muani, whatever happened to him. Ugarte, 60 million, they had to take a cut on him. They lost money, or they will lose money, on Gonzalo Ramos, who they spent 80 million quid for. He gets on in the last 10 minutes every now and again, but that's about it. So it's not quite the miracle job that it's being made out to be, Crook, but it still is an impressive body of work from a man who's now won 2 Champions League with 2 different clubs.
Yeah, listen, they've not done it on a shoestring, but they have done it by clearly changing their philosophy and their principles. And the irony isn't lost on me, and I'm sure it's not lost on him, that Kylian Mbappe effectively forces his way out of Paris, joins Real Madrid, thinking that they'll win another European Cup, and it's his old club who benefit. And I think there's a model here. We're going to talk about Bruno Fernandes later and the potential of him leaving Manchester United for a hefty fee to go to Saudi Arabia. That's all well and good if you reinvest the money properly. And I think they've done that, PSG, with some shrewd signings. I mean, I know you think the turning point was when they changed the role that Dembele plays, because let's not forget, in the league phase, they only won one of their first 5 games. I watched them play at Arsenal. And if you'd said then, well, this team are going to go on and conquer Europe, I'd have said you're absolutely mad, because Arsenal were miles ahead that night at the Emirates. But he did make that subtle change. I do think Kvaratskhelia, I agree with you, was a brilliant signing in January. I know the hierarchy at Liverpool are big admirers, but I can only assume that the deal was quite a long way down the line, and that therefore he wasn't going to have his head turned by the Premier League. But I think he's a terrific player, Kvaratskhelia. He was at the Euros, and he's just been a joy to watch, particularly in the knockout rounds. The first leg of the semi-final against Arsenal, he was incredible.
Yeah, 24 goals this season for Kvaratskhelia before the final itself. Dembele's amazing, isn't he? I mean, he scored 33 goals in 49 appearances. The most he'd ever scored in a season before this one was 13. Absolutely ridiculous. 14, sorry, back in 2018-19. Absolutely ridiculous, his upward trajectory. Sometimes you find a manager that gets you. Sometimes you find a manager that knows how to unlock the secret. This is a guy who, for many years, could be absolutely breathtaking, good and bad in almost the same movement, Scott. He was so unpredictable. You never knew what Dembele was going to turn up from one second to another. But this season, he's been a different guy.
Yeah, and look, we have to give Luis Enrique here massive credit. But I always say, first and foremost, it's the player themselves. They're the ones who's got to go out and do it. They're the ones who's got to listen. They're the ones who's got to sleep, eat, drink well. They're the ones who've got to train hard and understand that once you go on the pitch, it's down to you. A manager can only do so much. But when you've got a manager who clearly, it's his way or the highway. And if you're able to understand that and say, do you know what, this guy will take me to winning trophies. And there's not that many managers out there that can be like that. But he's definitely one of them. Then the penny drops. And for him to play in that position, to be given that position, to be given that responsibility, and then to go on and score the goals that he's done, and as you rightly sort of said, lead the press. It just goes to show it's a brilliantly choreographed side, but it's a brilliant, talented player as well that is willing to do that, who has dropped his ego.
Yeah, his goal scoring hasn't been great for the last couple of weeks. And despite that, in 2025 alone, he's got 25 goals in 29 games, which is just remarkable, really. There will be some people, Crook, that can't look past the investment of the Qataris. I have to say, I think elite football now is all about big, massive corporations, wealth funds now pretty much anyway. That's the level that you're sort of dealing with these football clubs. But there was a bit of soul injected in this game with the emotions surrounding Luis Enrique and his daughter and that huge image at the end, the Tifo recreating the image from Berlin 2015 and repurposing it with Paris colours for 2025. I thought that was quite magical.
Yeah, I agree, and you'd have to have a heart of stone not to feel pleased for Luis Enrique, because to go through a personal tragedy like that and still manage to continue your career and to have a highlight like that shows an incredible strength of character. I know a lot has been written, particularly in the broadsheets, about the state ownership of PSG and why maybe this victory should not be celebrated, but I think it will be celebrated for that reason for Luis Enrique, and we should celebrate this exciting young PSG team as well. Football is about the fans, and obviously the other negative is some of the scenes we've seen in Paris, although I don't attach that to football fans, listening to all of the experts who've been talking about the current political situation in France. I don't think it's PSG fans who've gone out and caused these riots, but you've got to be pleased for the genuine football supporters. This has been their holy grail. And as you've said, Luis Enrique, I mean, wow, what a moment, what a man, and what a manager to win it with two different clubs.
Yeah, two people sadly, tragically died and 192 were injured. 559 people were arrested after victory celebrations spiraled into chaotic scenes on the streets of France. Clashes in Paris were the most ferocious. One man died in Dax, another elsewhere in Paris. The French police had to evacuate the Champs-Élysées on Saturday night, but everybody was back there again on Sunday to celebrate in a more peaceful manner the Parade of Champions as the players returned with the trophy. And Crook and I spoke to a couple of French experts on Sunday, on the Sunday session, in which the blame was attached to people who wanted to come and cause trouble, really, rather than football fans. And actually, one of the questions I asked, well, where does this come from? And the response was, well, this is what always happens in France when you get a big group of people together. It's a societal issue, not necessarily a football issue. There had been trouble in Munich as well. And I know, Crook, at the Champions League final a couple of years ago when you were in Istanbul, there was really difficult issues with transport. We had difficulties at points in Germany when we were getting to and from stadiums in the Euro 2024 as well. And German police confirmed that they had engaged with supporters, Inter and PSG supporters, who were aiming kicks at one another whilst trying to get on and off trains on Saturday as well. I think whatever happens here, at some point, someone's going to have to take control of the transport and organisational situation that surrounds the Champions League final, because it happens quite a lot that we end up talking about these issues in the aftermath of this showpiece event, Crook.
Yeah, and actually I remember saying after Istanbul, it was only the good behaviour of the Inter and Manchester City fans that averted what could have been a pretty serious situations, because the metros were overcrowded. There were Man City fans, if you remember, who couldn't get back from the stadium because the free shuttle buses that were supposed to take them back into Istanbul city centre didn't arrive until the early hours of the morning. So it doesn't surprise me that we've seen these type of clashes, people getting frustrated, and obviously that's spilling over. And I do think it's a UEFA problem. Now, I can only really compare the organisation of UEFA events to the World Cup in Qatar. I know it was a very unique situation. There weren't the volume of fans that you would expect at a usual World Cup, but that worked like clockwork. And as you mentioned, it didn't in Germany for the Euros. Thankfully, there weren't too many scenes of trouble because most fans behaved themselves. But at every major UEFA event I've been to, this type of thing does seem to be happening. And it didn't happen in Bilbao because the stadium was within walking distance of the city centre. I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, maybe that's the sort of thing that they need to focus on is, picking these stadiums where you can get to and from it easier than having to take these long train rides. I mean, Munich isn't that far away from the city centre, but usually it was very good on that tube service out to Frott Manning, and then you walk up the big walkway and into the arena. It usually works very, very well, but on this occasion, I think there was a few sticky points in the build-up to it. What about Inter Milan? What happens next to Inzaghi? He's off by the sounds of it. So what happens to that team? Is it completely rebuilt, Scott?
I think so. I think they knew, didn't they? It was, now or never. And when you think about it, wasn't that long ago, what was it, 4-6 weeks ago, that they were on the chance for a treble. And, heartbreak season, really. I think it's going to be. We'll have to wait and see what happens to the manager, but whatever happens to him, there's a lot of players now, they know that was their last chance. And it was almost as if I felt what happened in Serie A took a lot out of them. And this game was one game too far and they couldn't live. It's almost like, a boxer that's just had too many fights with the Barcelona games, with Serie A trying to chase down Napoli. And then this one coming up against a young, fit Muhammad Ali. It was a little bit sad to see, really, wasn't it, from an Inter point of view?
It was, yeah.
Because they deserve better, especially what they gave us in the semi-final. But, PSG were that good. They were really poor, but I do want to say it's because PSG were that good. But the midfield they didn't get anywhere near the ball, did they?
No. Crook looks like he's an Inter supporter sitting there with his hand resting on his chin, absolutely furious about the fact that they played so badly. Don't be so grumpy. Just tell us about where Inzaghi's going to end up, because is it Saudi Arabia, we think?
Yeah, Al Hilal, who are also the club trying to sign Bruno, seem pretty confident they can get this deal done. I think he's been offered an incredible amount of money to make that move. I don't think it would necessarily just be a financial decision. You've just mentioned there that this team probably has come to the end of the road. Brilliant achievement to get in 2 Champions League finals. That they can count themselves hard done by about the Manchester City defeat. They played pretty well that night. They didn't on Saturday. I know you were particularly agitated about the way that they set up. Marco Silva has been mentioned as someone that Inter Milan potentially admire, but he did tell me in the last day of the season that he was going to stay at Fulham. Obviously, there's been a bit of interest from Tottenham and Saudi as well. So interesting to see whether he can be persuaded, because Juventus have him on their list as well. They're looking for a new manager.
He did tell you that. And I listened to the interview because you sent it to me, because you said it was so good I should listen to it.
That's true.
But I listened to it and I wasn't that convinced. I listened to it and I thought, oh, he's going to say, because you'd said to me, he said he's going to stay, it's a line, blah, blah, blah. And I listened to it and I thought, you just kind of backed him into a corner, and he almost had to say it, didn't he? And he uttered it. He didn't sort of proclaim I'm staying. He sort of uttered it in conversation. So I'm not 100% convinced on that. Are you really?
I don't know if he would go to Inter Milan. You know, obviously it's a huge club, but you've mentioned they're going to be in need of a rebuild. I think ultimately it will come down to what Fulham do this summer. You know, what promises he gets from the owners in terms of keeping players, because we know Anthony Robinson and Rodrigo Muniz are both sought after, and whether he'll get funds to reinvest, because if not, there's an argument to say he's probably taken Fulham as far as he can with what they achieved this season, finishing just outside the top 10.
Yeah, it was a very good interview, Scott. It really was.
Well, you know, he pins lots of managers up against the wall and makes them say what he wants them to say. You know,
he uses his physicality as a sort of domineering.
Although we know he's half the man he used to be now, don't we?
Oh yeah, I know. He's like, he's disappearing in front of our eyes.
Not quite. Got my gym kit on today. Look.
You know what? He's trying. He's working hard. You know, he's doing his best. And
I quickly chatted to Dean.
We're on this. We're all on this sort of summer health kick, aren't we? We've been inspired by Dean Ashton. We keep looking at Dean Ashton, thinking.
Yeah, and I was chatting to him while we were both having beers, dancing to Pete Tong's Ibiza Classics, and Crookie's name came up, and we said, "Yeah, no, I just told him what I did," and apparently he's following his regime, and well, the pounds are falling off, aren't they, Crookie?
So far, so good.
But do you know what that sounds like? That sounds like, yeah, but I got home last night and I had 7 pints.
No. Very good last night.
Were you? Gins?
Yeah. No, little bit of chicken and noodles. Yeah, that was it. Small portion.
Wow.
Very good.
Well done. Okay, that was the Champions League, Inter Milan and PSG. Congratulations to PSG, the first-time champions of Europe. And actually, how weird is this? That the last 3 times that Munich has hosted the European Cup final, it's been won by a first-time winner. That is a quirk of modern scheduling. Right, okay, let's look at all things Premier League now. Transfer window time, because it has been a fast start. Chelsea out of the blocks, Delap done, medical Monday, the 2nd of June, and personal terms already agreed, a 6-year deal in place, and he will go into the squad for the Club World Cup. Crook, easy deal to do?
Yeah, relatively. Obviously, the release clause was £30 million. That was never going to be a problem. He held talks with a number of Premier League clubs, Newcastle, Everton, Manchester United and Chelsea. I think ultimately what swung it for Chelsea is the fact they're in the Champions League next season. I think if United had won the Europa League, then maybe his decision would have been different, because he was quite keen at one stage to get back to the Northwest. We've mentioned on air a couple of times, he was also seeking guarantees from his suitors that he'd get playing time this season, that he'd be the main man. So that does raise the question when it comes to Chelsea. What happens to Scott Minto's love child, Nicholas Jackson?
What happens to Nico Jackson? Because my view on it is that there's enough games for everyone to go round, Scott.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I felt I was very much in the minority of one defending him. What was it, last season or season before? Seems ages ago now. But I still don't think he's not the finished article. I'm not sure he's ever going to be the finished article. So I know he tries to say that he's my love child and that, but he's certainly got all the attributes to be a top striker. But I don't think he'll be a top class finisher. And whatever happened, Chelsea needed another striker. You're absolutely right. No striker can go in now and say, I demand first team football. You've got to prove it. Simple as that. Especially someone who's still proving himself. It's a no-brainer, £30 million. But yeah, is it more than enough games? And we've spoken about this before, Sam, haven't we? It's one thing to combine the Premier League and the Conference League. It's another thing to combine the Premier League and the Champions League. So I think both these strikers will get plenty of minutes.
Chelsea look like they're going to have a busy couple of weeks in the build-up to this June 14th start for the Club World Cup, which is live on talkSPORT, and Scotty's going to be a big part of that coverage. Manchester United, they've also raced out of the blocks with a £62.5 million transfer of Matthias Cunha, first broken by Crook on April the 7th. He's a bit of a maverick, but he's also incredibly versatile and can play as a 9, can drop deep, play as a 10. He's a useful acquisition for Manchester United, and Amorim obviously has a plan for him.
Yeah, I think he's got all the attributes to fit into the way that Ruben Amorim wants to play. Obviously, there is a question about his character and maybe the fact he doesn't particularly love to train or run around too much. We had that stat that came out a couple of weeks ago that he did more walking than anybody else in the Premier League. But what encourages me with my Manchester United hat on is that he wasn't focused on whether or not they qualify for the Champions League. He wasn't even focused on money, as I understand it, at the start of the conversations. He wanted to be sold the project by Ruben Amorim. He wanted to know where he fitted in. And I think he was sold from quite an early stage. So I think this could be a good transfer. He's going to take Marcus Rashford's number 10 jersey. He almost demanded that during negotiations because he wants to be that guy. He sees himself as a protagonist. He sees himself as someone who can handle the pressure of following in the footsteps of the likes of Ruud van Nistelrooy and Wayne Rooney and Mark Hughes, who had that number. I think this could be quite a good signing for Manchester United.
RB Leipzig, Hertha Berlin, Sion, Atletico Madrid, Wolverhampton Wanderers. That's a lot of clubs to have by the time that you're 26, Scott. Is this going to be the long-term move where Matthias Cunha puts his feet under the table?
Well, it needs to be, doesn't it? It needs to be for him, but it also needs to be for Manchester United. I'd said when we were out in Poland, that is the slight worry. There's a little niggling thing in the back of my head that, is he the type of character that Manchester United want going forward, or is he the type of character that Manchester United have had for the last 10 years? A new manager's come in. He can sort of tell Cunha exactly what he wants. He can sit him down and show the Champions League final and show this is what we can do if we get everyone working in the right direction. Don't walk so much. You're not Lionel Messi. There's only 1 or 2 players in world football that can do that. And even Mbappe tries to do it, and he doesn't always win trophies. So, look, I think from Crookie's point of view, he's still got that sort of furrowed brow at the moment, isn't he? And I don't know if he's still worried about,
Do you know what I think that might be, though, Scott? It might be hangry.
Yeah.
Might be hangry.
Is he fasting at the moment as well? So he's got to wait another half an hour before he can munch on his cornflakes. But look, I think it has to be for United. I mean, United and Amorim. And, I've also mentioned this before, that Amorim wants to play a certain type of style, a certain formation. And if you are going to give him what he wants, which you should, then if that doesn't work, then you've got to get rid of that group of players as well. Or you're wanting versatile players. So it's a massive summer for Manchester United, and it's a massive summer for Cunha. And he's almost, at this moment in time, the kind of star of the summer. And he needs to sort of lead by example for sure.
Don't want to spend the whole morning talking about Manchester United. We're going to rattle through the next 2 names, and Crook can tell me which club they will be plying their trade at by the time we get to August next year. Alejandro Garnacho.
Well, he's on Chelsea's list, but he's on the list with Gittins and Nico Williams. Now, I think Nico Williams is the most unlikely of that trio just because of the wage demands, but it does look like they're advancing on Gittins, Dortmund, someone that Joe Shields, I think, knew as a teenager, obviously a big part of Chelsea's recruitment, So maybe Garnacho more likely for Atletico Madrid. Fascinated to see how he would fit into playing under Diego Simeone, but they're very keen.
Okay, well, two South Americans working together always seems to come up trumps. Bruno Fernandes.
I do think this is 50-50, but it wouldn't surprise me if he goes to Al Hilal. Saudi sources were telling us on Sunday night that talks have been very positive. I think Bruno Fernandes is still mulling over with his family what to do. But I think key here is Manchester United are willing to cash in and use that £100 million there or thereabouts to rebuild the squad. He's 31 on his next birthday. Now, I think he's been a good player for Manchester United, and I can understand the argument that if they cash in, it makes them look like a small club. But as PSG have shown, sometimes you have to sell your best players to progress.
I am a little bit worried about Manchester United's recruitment. I got an email this morning asking me to play for them. That's a true story. That is actually a true story.
Me too. I said yes.
Did you? I said I couldn't. I'm working, and you're going to be working as well, so I wouldn't say yes because you're going to be with me. No, you're going to be with me.
I'm not going to be with you.
You are. You are. You're going to be with me that day. I promise you. You'll get a phone call. You'll be with me. You've said yes. I've said no.
I've said yes.
Well, I've said no because I'm working.
So, hold on a second. I'm on the outside here. What's this about?
No, we've just been asked to play for Manchester United, but that's it. That's it. We don't need to give you any more details than that, right? Okay. We're leaving it there. Okay. I've turned them down. Crookie jumped to the chance. That's it. That's the story. the fact that it might be just a game for media hacks is neither here nor there. But, don't ruin a good story.
If he plays well, Crookie, then maybe they might just sign him up on a 4-year deal. Who knows?
Yeah, Cunha and Crook up front. You never know. Okay, what else is there? Lots of stuff about Liverpool because we talked about teams getting things done very quickly. And they've been brilliant, actually, Liverpool. I mean, I still don't think they get enough credit, Liverpool, for the way that they have handled all of the stuff behind the scenes with the contracts, etc., knowing that they were well aware that Trent was leaving last summer, really, and the fact that they've got Van Dijk and Salah done, and they're going to sign Florian Wirtz. This is amazing. This is excellent recruitment. They brought in a brilliant manager who managed to steer the ship in a direction that maybe even Jurgen Klopp didn't manage to do last season. So this is excellent work, I think, Scott, and I think the whole organisation needs praising.
Do you know what? I was at my nephew's 21st birthday party before I went up to Pete Tong. So I was trying to listen into the Sunday session. I know what you were talking about. Did you go with Slot as the manager of the season?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. I think it's so just because he's dominated the Premier League and won it so early, people still don't really begin to understand the job that he did, following the iconic guy, charismatic man that was Jurgen Klopp. Constantly getting asked about the three best players, they're out of contract, playing a style of football that looked like they've been playing it for a decade. Yeah, I think he's been absolutely superb. And then, now Slot is obviously along with the hierarchy as well. Looks like they're doing it really smoothly. I mean, what a signing. He'll be Wirtz. A lot of money, but he's another one of those that's very skillful with the ball, but works hard without it. Frimpong would be great. Him and Bradley down the right back can fight for that position during the season. So, I listen again, pat on the back, and I think they're the team to beat next season.
Yeah, they are going to let our good friend Queven Kelleher go, and this has got us all scratching our heads, right? So, no disrespect to the team that he's going to go to, right? Brentford. Congratulations to Brentford. You have done a brilliant job. You have got a goalkeeper of top quality for 18 million quid. You've upgraded. You've sold Flecken for 11. You've got him in for 18. Fantastic. This is great for you. I don't get why Chelsea, why Tottenham, why everybody who isn't Liverpool isn't knocking down the door to get this guy. Am I going mad?
I think Liverpool are surprised as well. The reason they've had to accept the fee is because they didn't get the bidding war that maybe they were anticipating. You can add producer Jeremy's Leeds to that list. I think he was desperate for Kelleher to come in and bolster their goalkeeping ranks. Bournemouth undecided about what to do with Kepa Arrizabalaga, but they didn't show interest in Kelleher anyway. Forest were there a year ago, but obviously Matt Sells had such a good season, they couldn't really make that move. So, 18 million is a great deal for Brentford. But fair play to Liverpool as well. He's only got a year left on his contract. They realise they probably kept him and maybe even held him back for long enough that he is ready to be a number one. They've got Mamardashvili coming in. So I think they've tried to make this as easy as possible for Kelleher, even though they would have liked a few more quid on the fee.
Ange Postecoglou is going to find out what is happening next season today or tomorrow. It's Monday as we talk. The anticipation is that he is not going to be the manager of Tottenham Hotspur going forward. Is that how you understand it, with Thomas Frank the likely first choice?
Yeah, that is the name that keeps being mentioned to me. Obviously, Andoni Iraola was on their list, Marco Silva we've mentioned as well, but it does appear that if, and maybe it's when and not if, Postecoglou is relieved of his duties, Thomas Frank will be the chosen one. There's been a high-profile departure from Spurs. As we've been recording this morning, Donna Cullen, trusted lieutenant to Daniel Levy as part of the hierarchy. She's been there since 2006 and been considered Levy's closest confidant. She's left. And obviously we know there's going to be a restructure at the top with the guy coming in from Arsenal, Paratici, we expect to return at some point. So big changes afoot at Tottenham.
And Scott Munn, we expect him to depart.
He'll go as well.
He was a
I think
big ally of Ange Postecoglou in the boardroom. So it is all change at Tottenham Hotspur this summer. So let's see what happens there and how that has an effect. Of course, Tottenham Hotspur are lucky enough to be able to play PSG in the Super Cup. Good luck with that, guys. Good luck with that. That's going to be a fun afternoon for them. Although they do get to go to Udinese and play in that stadium, which is a lovely little stadium, the Stadio Friuli. Let's round things off now with a quick look at England, who are back in action this weekend. Right, okay, off to Barcelona we go. And actually, Thomas Tuchel has used this time to get the England squad together as quick as possible and to do a bit of a training camp, right? Because they don't play till next Saturday, but he's had them in back end of last week in order to sort of, form that bond, get them together, start talking to them. So they're in Girona, so they're in a very nice hotel. We actually stayed there when we went to Girona versus Arsenal in the Champions League. And the England rugby team were using that facility to get ready for the Six Nations. And they were in the hotel. It's a lovely hotel. It's miles outside the city, so they're not going to get bothered. It's a great big gated thing. You can't get in there. There's a golf course. There's obviously a spa. There's great training facilities. But the idea is to get the team together, get them bonding, get them, as a group getting ready for the World Cup in a year's time, because they've got to spend a lot of time together, probably 9 weeks, hopefully, next summer. Does that suggest the squad that he has picked is the bulk of the squad that is going to go to the World Cup next year, Scott?
Yeah, I think so. I think he has to, obviously, the likes of Ivan Toney wants to take a look at, but he already knows. I mean, he knows English football well enough, but he's been watching since even before he was appointed the players and who's been playing well. I would say not only he probably knows 17, 18 of the squad, fitness providing, but he probably knows 8 or 9 of his first 11 and how he wants to play. So it is going to be really interesting to see who he picks. But, there are going to be players that are coming in and, the likes of, and I don't have a problem with, by the way, Jordan Henderson. You and I have discussed this before, and I said before the Euros that Gareth Southgate actually went with form, but I don't think he's gone with enough players who, around the training camp, if things don't go well, are able to just, make sure the balance is right. And I think that's what we saw after about game 2 of England. I think Jordan Henderson, whether he's going to be playing as many minutes, but I think it'd be a great addition there. So I don't have a problem with his inclusion. Jared Bowen, I think, can count himself very unlucky he's not in there, but there's some very good forward-thinking players there. So it's a tough one for sure.
Yeah, Mark Gay injured at the moment. That's why he's not involved too. But I think with the Henderson thing, it sort of factors into the idea of a squad. And I think you've got to remember that this is a squad. So it's you can get irate or annoyed about the fact that your player that you love isn't in the 26 or whatever it is. But I think the process now is about developing a 16, a core group of players that are going to be part of the first team and the finishers. That's the plan from Thomas Tuchel. And I think he's got pretty much that unit. of the type of player that he wants and most of the characters. There might be one or two places that he hasn't nailed down, but I think he's got an idea of that 16. Your next question is okay, if I've got the 16 that I'm going to really use, what are the other 9 going to do? Well, they're going to be helping out with training. They're going to be the bodies that you use in training. There might be the bodies that you use in an emergency. They might be a body that you use as a wild card, as in a maverick. But they're going to be players that essentially aren't going to get very many minutes and are not going to be satisfied by sitting on the bench. They're going to be a little bit disgruntled because they're not going to play. They're going to know that from the very beginning. So those players have got to be excellent characters. So if you're wondering why Conor Gallagher is involved, if you're wondering why maybe down the line you get someone like, I don't know, a Mason Mount, or if you get Jordan Henderson in the squad, then maybe it's because those characters are the ones that you can carry in that extra part of the squad that isn't going to be involved in the matches regularly, but are also going to be assets around the camp.
Yeah, and Gareth was quite good at that, Gareth Southgate, probably up until the last tournament. And there were a few issues with certain individuals maybe not getting as many minutes as they would have liked. So I think Thomas Tuchel, who made phone calls to a lot of players and would have spoken to, Gareth himself, I'm sure, was aware of that. And I think that's why certainly Jordan Henderson has been asked to come back out the international wilderness, not just because of what he can do on the pitch. I think Scott's right. There's a possibility that certainly against the better opponents, he can bring a bit of balance to the team, but because he's a good lad around the camp, as you say, which obviously famously Roy Keane, your ITV colleague, derided at one stage, but it looks like Thomas Tuchel is the same thinking.
They're mates. They text each other afterwards, and he gave Jordan his debut, his senior debut at Sunderland. He's a big fan. So yeah, it was. It was. What was it? The quizzes. He said he did once you do the quizzes.
Sam, you need it though. Honestly, you need it. If you're away for what is it, 6, 7, 8, possibly 9 weeks?
Well, the acclimatisation period is 9 days. The World Cup itself is 5 weeks. They're probably going to play 2 games whilst they're out there. They might include that in the 9 days in the build-up. So they're going to be away in America for at least 7 weeks. That's a fact. And I think they join up at least a week before that. So if they get to the final, cross fingers, then it's going to be 8 or 9 weeks.
So you absolutely 100% need those type of characters. And they're not necessarily the ones that are going to go on and win you the World Cup on the pitch, but they can help and provide that stability that, let's be fair, what we saw after game 2 of the Euros was almost how it was pre-Gareth Southgate, where it was them against us, and it didn't feel right. And we got to the final, limped the way to the final, but it didn't feel like we're in the final. So I just think players and characters like them are so important off the pitch. I really do. But on the pitch, I am so interested to see what he does with Jude Bellingham, with Declan Rice, with Cole Palmer. Where does he play Rice? Does he do 2 8s and therefore no 10? So how can you not play Cole Palmer? Phil Foden obviously is out the equation right now. So that for me as an 11 is what I'm really interested in. But the squad, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, it's the 6. That's the issue. How do you get someone to play that position? There isn't really an option for that at the moment. I mean, Gallagher, the most likely, I suppose, with the ones that are there, or Henderson at the moment. But I don't think that you can't play Declan Rice and Jude Bellingham together as 2 pivots with a 10. It doesn't work. I think they've sort of realised that now. So I think they're thinking about the 2 8s, as you mentioned, with Declan and Jude playing higher up and maybe sacrificing a 10. But then you've got to get someone to play in that deeper position, and finding that person is all very difficult. Saudi Arabia is the home of Ivan Toney, and he is in the squad. And he's in the squad because they haven't had a chance to look at him, really. Every other country doesn't mind calling up players from Saudi Arabia. Why is there a stigma attached to it? Why are we all so surprised?
No, I've not got a massive issue with that, because you're right. Ronaldo still plays for Portugal. Ruben Neves plays for Portugal. Bruno Fernandes will play for Portugal at the World Cup, even if he's playing in Saudi. I think when a highly paid England manager comes out and said he's not had time to go and watch him in person, that's the bit that raised eyebrows. Certainly Troy Deeney was far from happy about that. I'm not sure that Thomas Tuchel necessarily should have admitted that publicly as the reason that Ivan Toney is in the squad, and I'm not sure Dominic Solanke will be overly enamoured about that either.
Well, maybe the FA wouldn't pay for the expenses, because it's quite a it's quite a trip. I'm not saying that's the case, but maybe it is. I don't know. So it is a trip to go out there. Unless you're watching a collection of players, it's a big commitment to go all the way over there just to watch one player when you can watch him on the video, Scott, don't you think?
No, I don't. I think he should have gone out there. I think the FA have probably wasted money elsewhere where they can, justify a business class trip for Thomas Tuchel to go out and see him in person, to speak to him, to speak to his manager. What's he like to play under here? What maybe even his teammates? What's he like to play with? No, I think he should have done it personally. But do you know what? It's all about what he does at the World Cup. And the one thing I would say about Thomas Tuchel, I think he should have taken the job earlier when it was first decided. I don't know why he had to wait until January the 1st or whenever it was. I think there's a few things that we could sort of say, I personally think he should have done better. But ultimately, this is Thomas Tuchel who will do whatever he wants. And there's a part of me that almost likes the mindset. He doesn't seem to care. He'll just do what he thinks is right, not necessarily what is seen to be the right thing. So, we'll go with him on that. But no, I think he should have gone out to watch him.
I'll let you into a little secret. He absolutely loves being the England manager. He was at Chelsea and he I think, going back to 2021, he was in the sort of afterglow of winning the Champions League. And he was sitting there and he was thinking to himself, I'd love to stay here forever and win loads of trophies at Chelsea. I love London. I love being here. I love this team. He was fully invested. Then the European Championships happened in England that summer. And obviously he was in London, living in London at the time, and he saw it all kick off. And, everyone was behind the team and they got to the final and the emotion was amazing and the support. And he said there was people that were working in the club that were suits, right? There were suits in the club. But they would turn up to a barbecue or they would go to the stadium in full England kit because they were so desperate for anything. Well, what are you doing? And they were, England, it's England, it's England, it's England. And he said he couldn't believe the atmosphere and the sort of passion and the support and the outpouring of emotion for the England team that was coming from everywhere, and not just punters, but from people inside the game as well. He said, I've never seen anything like it. We don't have that in Germany. There's no way that you'd get. An example he would give would say Rummenigge is not going to turn up in a Germany shirt and go and watch Germany and get behind them. But these guys, he said, it was amazing. Can't quite believe that the support. And he said, from that day on, he said, if I take an international job, I'm taking that one. And he's been focused on it ever since. And I think he's got a real sort of desire. He's a bit of an Anglophile. He does love English football. He does love being in England. So the idea, and he does, by the way, he lives in England, just in case anyone thinks he doesn't. He does. He lives in England. He just wants to be a part of it. And I think, that's a great thing. I think that's a great thing that he feels the passion. He wants to feed off the passion. He's a very charismatic guy, and he sort of loves that energy that comes off the support. So let's hope that works for him and for the England team, because we've got 2 games coming up, Andorra and Senegal, both live on talkSPORT. And I think it's going to be an interesting stuff. We're going to learn some bits and pieces. We'll see you next week to preview the second of the England games, back on Monday and Wednesday next week. So join us after the weekend and we'll go through all the stuff that's happened with England and beyond. Speak to you soon.